My husband, Jake Langford, gets poisoned with the toxic aphrodisiac in order to save me. Apparently, he needs to sleep with 99 virgins in order to get cured. Every time he's done with a session, Jake looks at me with red-rimmed eyes. You mustn't think badly of me, Lily. Whenever he says that, the jealousy and resentment I feel get drowned out by guilt immediately. I count the days, thinking that things between Jake and me will go back to how they were like before once we've gone through 99 days of hell. That is, until I discover the second phone hiding inside our closet. Only then do I realize that there's no such thing as 99 virgins. It turns out that Jake has been sleeping with the same woman every night this whole time. Lillian's POV. The phone fell onto the floor with a crisp clatter. The video on it was still playing. Jake, what if Lillian found out you lied to her? After all, you never got poisoned. You even planned the abduction yourself, and that took away her innocence and left her unable to have children. With one last push, Jake Langford turned around and planted a kiss on Michelle Langford's forehead. Then he picked her up and carried her to the bathroom. It doesn't matter, he said. Michelle chuckled coyly. You're right. Because of that incident, Lillian has always thought of you as her savior, hasn't she? Jake's voice was low and seductive. And you are my personal idol. Would you like to be pampered one more time? Suggestive sounds could be heard again, this time from the bathroom. My whole body felt limp, and I leaned against a wall for support. 6 months ago, my fiancé walked right out of our wedding. I became the joke of the whole social circle. However, Jake suddenly proposed to me. Lily, I've always had feelings for you. Will you marry me? I never thought that a wealthy heir from Safeguard, who had countless admirers, would propose to me. At that moment, as if I had found a lifeline, I nodded without hesitation. Jake and I quickly settled on a wedding date, but before the banquet even began, I was abducted. To save me, Jake was forced to drink poisoned wine. Ever since then, I had been caught in a cycle of sorrow and regret. But every time I saw the gloomy look on Jake's face, I would instantly be overcome with regret. Videos continued playing one after another on the phone. When the phone automatically turned off, the door opened. Seeing me on the floor, Jake urgently rushed up to me. Lily, what happened? The strong smell of roses lingering in his hair penetrated my nostrils. His adopted sister, Michelle, loved roses. I shook my head. Then I picked up the phone on the floor and handed it to him. Jake froze, his expression darkening. After making sure that it was turned off, he gradually relaxed. Where did you find this? It's my backup phone. I clenched my fists tightly, suppressing my emotions that were on the verge of eruption. I said calmly, it fell out when I was doing the laundry. The phone was placed in an exquisite box, and I had assumed it was a surprise he had prepared for my birthday. However, I couldn't unlock it, even after trying every password I could think of. That was until I keyed in Michelle's birthday. Jake carried me onto the bed. Then he fastened a bracelet around my wrist. Happy birthday, Lily. My gaze fell upon his pants pocket. Something pink was peeking out of it. It was an open condom wrapper. Once, when Michelle dragged me to an adult store, she bought a few and even gifted one to me. Back then, she had a mysterious smile on her face when she said, Lillian, trust me. Jake will love it. And now, I finally realized why she had seemed so sure about it. A notification sounded. In our family group chat, Michelle had sent a photo and tagged everyone in her message that read, Jake, thank you for the jewelry. You're the best. Jake tapped at his phone, the corners of his lips subconsciously turning up. An empty box with a free gift label sat in an inconspicuous corner of the photo. Lowering my head, I stroked the bracelet on my wrist, which was still warm from Jake's touch. I said with a chuckle, thank you, honey. Then I casually asked, where's the packaging? Jake was typing when his fingers froze. Then he reached out and pinched my cheek. I was worried that a certain someone would get jealous, so as soon as I was done with the treatment, I hurriedly went to get a gift and rushed home. I totally forgot about the packaging. Come on, this is the last time. It'll all be over soon. I can't even be bothered to look at her. He hugged me tightly. Lily, don't hate me for this. Noticing that I still hadn't said a word, he sighed. I'm going to take a shower. My nails dug into my flesh as I watched him take the phone into the bathroom. Meanwhile, Michelle, who had been active in the family group chat, went silent. When I heard the shower start running, I dialed a number. Marry me. I'll agree to all the terms you mentioned last time. The moment I hung up, I realized Jake was standing behind me. Who were you talking to? Jake asked. Turning off my phone screen, I waved it off. It was a spam call. Noticing my lack of enthusiasm, he lowered his head and kissed me, only to find my whole body burning. He scrambled downstairs to get medicine for me. I took a photo of the scene and sent it to the family group chat. While Jake was giving me the medicine, he answered a call that just came in. He immediately panicked, so much so that he accidentally spilled hot water onto me. He seemed to have forgotten all about me as he rushed out without so much as a glance back. We were just a single floor apart. Soon, he came back with Michelle in his arms. I stood at the entrance, staring at them in bewilderment. Jake looked at me, his gaze filled with hatred. Why would you send a photo like that in the group chat? Do you have any idea that Shell swallowed sleeping pills? Just then, Michelle slowly came to. She said in a sobbing tone, Jake, it's not Lillian's fault. I couldn't fall asleep, so I took more sleeping pills than usual. Back when we lived under the same roof, Jake had always been the one to put me to bed. Now that he's married, I still haven't gotten out of the habit. I just felt a little sad when I saw the photo you sent, Lillian. Jake said in a low voice, apologized to her. Curving my lips into a smile, I stared straight at Michelle. Do you also take sleeping pills every time Jake gets his treatment from women at night? The two froze. Then Jake flew into a rage. Lillian, this is between us. Why would you mention that to Shell? She's just my sister. Michelle looked even more wounded. Lillian, why would you say something like that? Jake got poisoned because of you, you know. I remained smiling. Is that so? Are you sure it was because of me and not you? Michelle was stunned. Then she looked at Jake in a panic. Jake walked over to me and gripped my wrist. Through gritted teeth, he said, Lillian, what's the matter with you? I've already explained it to you countless times. Those women are just antidotes to me. They pose no threat to your position. There's no need to vent your anger on Shell. I raised my head, forcing back tears. I recalled the night of my wedding. I was abducted and brought to a desert island, where I was tortured by different men all through the night. By the time I woke up, my whole body was broken, and I was bleeding from the lower part of my body. When the doctor declared that my womb had to be removed, Jake held my hands tightly and said with deep sorrow in his eyes, It's okay. You're the only one I need. I don't need any children. However, I disregarded my pain as I hastily examined his wounds. What did you do? How could they have let me go that easily? Jake's gaze was filled with sadness. I drank the wine they poisoned. Beside him, Michelle sobbed pitifully. Jake, that was a toxic aphrodisiac. If you don't get 99 virgins to cure you, you'll die. The searing pain on my face pulled me out of my thoughts. Jake had slapped me. He threw a large bouquet of roses at me, and the rose's thorns sliced my face. He was furious. Shell is allergic to pollen. Why did you put flowers in the living room? Are you trying to kill her? Just then, the ambulance finally arrived. Like a madman, Jake carried Michelle in his arms and rushed outside. He was about to step through the door when he turned around and glared at me. Lillian, Shell and I grew up together. If anything happens to her, I will never forgive you. I was in a daze as I reached up to touch the rashes on my face. Bending over, I picked up the card that came with the bouquet. There was bold lettering on it that read, Happy birthday, Lily. I love you. I let out a bitter laugh as I stared at Jake, who was getting further away. We had been married for so long. He kept claiming he loved me, but he had no idea that I was allergic to pollen too. Back then, I just couldn't bring myself to throw away the flowers he gave me. With my fever still burning, I went to pack up my luggage. It had only been 6 months. A single suitcase was more than enough to fit all my belongings. For some reason, I opened the door to the room that originally belonged to Michelle. A wall full of close-up selfies came into view. Gifts from Jake seemed to fill up the whole room. On the bed, a patch of liquid they hadn't managed to clean had already dried up. In the closet, their underwear was stacked together just like that. I couldn't stop my fingers from shaking. No wonder he told me never to enter this room. I went to the living room and burned the only photo I had taken with Jake. Then, I took off my bracelet and wedding ring. I had just walked through the door when a group of men in black clothing dragged me into a van. I was brought to the hospital. When Jake caught sight of me, he became frantic as he dragged me up to the doctor. Her kidneys are a match. She has Rh-negative blood, just like Shell. She can donate her kidney. The doctor frowned. This lady doesn't seem stable enough for an immediate operation. Jake shouted furiously. Do it right now. Get your director here. I struggled with all my might, but the burly men held me down. When I was being sent into the operating room, I glared at Jake. You'll regret this. Jake gently caressed my face the way he always did, but I could feel the coldness radiating from his fingertips. Be good, okay? I'll wait for you. When I woke up, there was no one beside me. I could hear giggles coming from the next bed. In our family group chat, messages were coming in like crazy. Photo after photo popped up. In those photos, Jake was patiently peeling an apple for Michelle, carefully feeding her some medicine, earnestly washing her underwear, and even keeping watch by her side all night. I touched my waist. It was bound in bandages, and throbbing pain spread throughout my body. My phone fell to the floor. The next bed instantly went silent. Jake immediately came over and held my hand. You're awake. Then his expression shifted. Where's your ring? I looked away and said calmly, I can't wear it during the operation. Kissing the corner of my mouth, Jake pressed an 8-figure check into my hands. Here's your compensation. I lost my mind then. Tearing the check into pieces, I shouted furiously, Jake, I'm divorcing you. He looked confused. That's not enough for you? With that, he signed check after check. Pressing them to my chest, he asked, How about now? Then his lips curved into a cruel smile. Lily, it's just a kidney. This money is more than enough to last you several lifetimes. Don't ever mention divorce again. After all, aside from me, no one else would want a woman without a womb. Just then Michelle's weak voice rang out. Clutching her stomach, she asked, Jake, is Lillian upset at me? Here, Lillian, take your kidney back. Jake hastily picked her up in his arms and carried her to the bed. You can't get out of bed yet. When he had finished speaking, his assistant knocked on the door and asked for him. Before leaving, Jake glanced at me as if something was on his mind. After going out the door, he suddenly turned around. Why did you change your phone password? I was expressionless. I completely ignored him. He sighed. I was the one who wanted you to donate your kidney. Don't blame it on Shell. She's innocent. After Jake had left, Michelle leaned against the doorframe with a half-smile on her face. She looked nothing like a patient who had just undergone surgery. Lillian, you found out everything, didn't you? I struggled to sit up. Why? Scoffing, she walked up to me and leaned in close to my ear. Because you're my walking organ bank, dear Lillian. If not, why would your womb be removed? You were just destroyed lower down. Your womb was perfectly fine. Your blood type and all your organs are a perfect match for me. That was why Jake married you. Did you really believe that he likes you? I broke out in a cold sweat. When she saw my reaction, she grew even more gleeful. She walked up to me and slapped me several times across the face. Lillian, it was your fault for sending that photo to provoke me. With that, she grinned as she untied her hospital gown. Her fair skin was completely free of wounds. This is your punishment for provoking me. I shall thank you on behalf of my dog. You should have seen him chowing down on your kidney. He was so happy. I sprang to my feet and shoved her away with all my might. You're crazy. However, she simply picked up my notebook, which had fallen out of my bag. As she leafed through it, she laughed. Goodness, you even took note of these things? It has already been 99 times, but Jake said he still hasn't had enough of me. That was the final straw. I was about to approach her when she picked up the paring knife on the table and stabbed me in the stomach. Then she suddenly fell to her knees before me, crying, I'm sorry, Lillian. I shouldn't have taken your kidney. With that, she ran to the window. You'll get your kidney back if I die, right? No. Jake rushed over and held Michelle tightly. I had never seen him so panicked before. Jake had knocked me to the floor in the process. My wound was torn open, and blood poured out of me. But Michelle still insisted on kneeling before me. She sobbed pitifully. I'm sorry. Jake touched her forehead, his heart breaking for her. You're bleeding. Then he turned to me with a fierce look in his eyes. He walked over to me and grabbed me by the hair, dragging me to Michelle's feet. He repeatedly brought my head down onto the floor. My head hit the tiles with loud thuds. Even passers-by were gathering around to see what was going on. I had no idea how long this had gone on. My head was bleeding, and the floor was painted red. My vision turned black. Before I passed out, I heard Jake anxiously calling my name. I was startled awake from my nightmares. Jake was sitting right by my bed, his gaze filled with disdain as he said, Lillian, I never thought you'd be so desperate to frame Shell that you'd stab yourself. With that, he glanced at the nurses standing outside the door. Since you love hurting yourself for attention, I'll indulge you. Shell lost so much blood because of you. You seem to have plenty of blood, so let's draw some. He gestured to the nurses. Draw her blood. One of the nurses said hesitantly, Mr. Langford, the patient is too unstable for blood draws right now. Jake kicked the nurse to the floor. Then turn in your resignation letters to the director. I said weakly to the nurses, it's okay, just do it. Jake's expression shifted, and he gave me a complicated look. By the 10th vial of blood, my monitor started beeping loudly. The nurses went red in the face with anxiety. Mr. Langford, we have to stop. She'll die. Jake pursed his lips. He was about to say something when Michelle let out a groan from the next bed. His expression darkened and he said, continue. I couldn't remember when I lost consciousness. I only knew that when I came to, all the nurses in the ward were happily holding gifts as they whispered among themselves. A nurse said, Mr. Langford is so good to his sister. He gave everyone in the hospital a gift just because his sister is pregnant. Another replied, isn't that obvious? If not, why would he drain almost all of his wife's blood for his sister's sake? Someone said, that reminds me. I kind of pity the woman. I clenched my fists tightly as I let out a whimper. They took my womb. Suddenly, a photo popped up on my phone. It was a photo of Jake and Michelle's marriage certificate. Trembling, I tapped on the photo and zoomed in on it. I almost couldn't breathe. Right after that, a voice message came in. Michelle said, Lillian is so stupid. Even after so long, she hasn't realized that her marriage certificate is fake. Jake let out a laugh. You're a smart one, aren't you? Michelle said in a slightly sad tone. But I'm so jealous of Lillian. She gets to be seen with you in public. Jake gently coaxed her. Come on. We need her as a cover so that our child and we can always be together. I couldn't think straight anymore. Ripping the forecatheter out of my body, I scrambled to escape the ward. However, when I was about to round a corner, I heard a familiar voice. The voice said, "Mr. Langford, are you sure you want Mrs. Langford abducted again?" Jake's voice was calm. "She's misbehaving. She needs to be taught a lesson. Shell needs an obedient blood bank for her pregnancy and delivery. If not, how can I openly take care of Shell and our child?" I covered my mouth with my hand. My heart was thumping, and my fingers trembled uncontrollably. By the time Jake found me, I was slumped in a chair in the hospital. He gently crouched down in front of me. "How did you end up here?" Recalling the torture I went through, I bit my lip so hard that I tasted blood. Gripping Jake's arm tightly, I pleaded, "I'm sorry. I'll apologize to Michelle." But he just chuckled. "You are my wife. Shell forgave you a long time ago." The next moment, I fainted in his arms. When I opened my eyes, the faces that had always appeared in my nightmares were grinning at me. "We meet again, Mrs. Langford." I struggled with all my might. "Go away. Get lost." But rough fingers were already rubbing my chest, and my pants were pulled down. I closed my eyes in despair. A week later, Jake went home after a long day at work. Massaging his temples, he subconsciously called out, "Lily, get me a drink." However, his surroundings were dark. No one answered. Even their photo on the wall had disappeared. Jake called his assistant in annoyance. "Why isn't Lillian back yet? They're only supposed to scare her. Do they really have to take that long?" The assistant replied anxiously, "Mr. Langford, the signal is bad on the island. We haven't gotten in contact with them yet." Jake suddenly froze as he stared at a female corpse being shown on the news. Meanwhile, the doorbell rang. A present had arrived. The rain outside the Langford penthouse was torrential, washing over the floor-to-ceiling glass windows in long, distorted sheets. Jake stood in the center of the dark living room, the quiet hum of his phone still clutched in his hand. He looked at the blank space on the wall where our wedding portrait used to hang. There was only a faint, rectangular outline in the dust left behind. "Lily," he called out, his voice tinged with a sharp, familiar irritation. "Get me a drink. And turn the heater on." No one answered. The house was cold, smelling faintly of stale roses and the ozone of the coming storm. He pulled out his phone, his thumb tapping the screen with a frantic, twitching energy as he dialed his chief of security. "Have you reached the men on the island yet? Why is the signal still down?" "Mr. Langford." The assistant's voice was shaking on the other end. The local authorities on the island just executed a raid. They're saying the warehouse has been leveled. We can't find our men." Jake's heart gave a sudden, violent lurch. He turned his head slowly, his eyes catching the glowing screen of the television in the corner. A local news anchor was speaking with a grave, serious expression. "Breaking news from Safeguard's southern coast. A massive explosion has destroyed an abandoned warehouse on the private island. Police have recovered several male bodies associated with a local human trafficking syndicate. A female body has also been found near the shore." "No," Jake whispered, his face turning a sickly, translucent white. "No. She's my wife. She can't die." Before he could process the report, the sharp, shrill ring of the penthouse doorbell echoed through the empty foyer. Jake scrambled toward the door, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock the heavy deadbolt. He threw the door open, expecting to see his security team, or perhaps the disheveled, bloody figure of Lillian crawling back to him. Standing on the threshold was a young man in a clean, tailored dark suit. He was holding a large, silver-insulated medical cooler. "Mr. Jake Langford?" the man asked, his voice calm, carrying a cold, professional distance. "Where is she?" Jake growled, grabbing the man's lapels. "Is she in the car? Where is Lillian?" The man didn't flinch. He gently but firmly pried Jake's fingers off his suit and set the silver cooler on the marble floor of the foyer. "My employer, Mr. Julian Sterling, asked me to deliver this present to you," the man said, a faint razor-edged smile touching his lips. "He said you've been looking for Lillian's kidney. He wanted to make sure you got the correct medical records." The man turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving the door wide open to the cold, wet night. Jake stood in the foyer, his chest heaving. He knelt down, his fingers trembling, as he popped the latches of the medical cooler. Inside, resting on a bed of dry ice, was a thick blue folder containing Michelle's actual, unfalsified medical records from the National Forensic Database, alongside a signed, legally registered marriage certificate between Lillian and Julian Sterling, dated 3 days ago. And at the very bottom of the cooler, preserved in a small glass jar of formalin, was a piece of gray, biological tissue. The label on the jar read, "The healthy kidney of Lillian Langford. Successfully preserved and transplanted into Julian Sterling's grandfather. Thank you for your donation, Mr. Langford." Jake's phone vibrated violently in his pocket. It was a text message from a blocked number. The Langford Group's stock has just been shorted by 80%. Your bank accounts are frozen. Welcome to the game, Jake. The room smelled of clean ozone, high-end sterile filters, and the warm, comforting scent of fresh cedarwood. I slowly opened my eyes. The harsh, white glare of the hospital lights didn't make me wince this time. The windows of the private VIP suite were covered in soft, cream-colored velvet drapes that let in only a gentle, warm morning light. I touched my waist. The painful, burning laceration where my kidney had been stolen was gone, replaced by a clean, professionally stitched surgical line that was already healing. My head, which Jake had repeatedly slammed into the tiles, was wrapped in a neat, white silk bandage. You're awake, a calm, deep voice said from the side of the bed. I turned my head. Julian Sterling was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, a tablet in his hand. He was dressed in a simple, immaculate gray wool suit, his sharp, dark eyes carrying a quiet, protective intensity. He was the head of the Sterling Group, the multi-billion-dollar empire that ruled Safeguard's financial sector and the Langford family's ultimate corporate nightmare. Julian. My voice was a dry, raspy whisper. The island. It's gone, Lily, Julian said, setting his tablet down. He walked over to the bed, his tall, powerful frame shielding me from the light as he reached down to adjust my blanket. My extraction team reached the warehouse 10 minutes after Jake's men started. We took them out. The female body the police found on the beach was one of the female thugs Jake hired to torture you. He looked at my hand, which was resting on the sheet, the hand that was no longer wearing the fake brass ring Jake had given me. I've already registered our marriage with the municipal court, Julian said softly. You are legally my wife, Lily. Under Safeguard's family protection laws, the Langfords have no legal claim to your custody, your medical decisions, or your files. Tears finally spilled over my cheeks, hot and thick, washing away the lingering terror that had paralyzed my mind for 6 months. I had been a walking organ bank. I had let them take my womb, my kidney, and my blood, believing Jake was my savior, who had drank poison to protect me. I had shrunk myself into a pathetic, weeping dog to appease his sister Michelle. But Julian had looked at my broken, mutilated body and had given me a weapon. Thank you, Julian. I sobbed, my fingers gripping his sleeve. Don't thank me yet, Lily, Julian said, his hand resting gently over mine, his touch warm, steady, and filled with an absolute, unbreakable strength. We still have to dismantle their house of cards. Within 3 days, the business world of Safeguard was hit by a catastrophic financial blockade. The Sterling Group's public relations department released a massive, legally verified evidence package to every major media outlet in the country. The package contained 1. The digital recordings of Jake and Michelle in our bedroom discussing how they planned Lillian's abductions to act as Michelle's obedient blood bank. 2. The real medical records of Michelle Langford, proving she had never suffered from kidney failure, and that she had faked her illnesses to extract Lillian's organs. 3. The fake marriage certificate Jake had given Lillian, along with his offshore account transactions proving he had paid a local syndicate to kidnap his own wife. The public fury was instantaneous and overwhelming. The Langford Group's stock plummeted 90% in 72 hours, halting trading on the exchange. The banks, sensitive to the massive corporate scandal, immediately called in their loans, freezing the family's remaining liquidity. At the same time, the police executed a warrant on Michelle's private villa. Michelle, who was supposedly pregnant and weak, was caught by the police trying to climb over the back fence of the villa, carrying 3 bags of stolen gold bars and designer jewelry. She was dragged back into the courtyard, her white silk dress covered in mud, her face pale with terror as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Jake stood in the center of his empty, dark office at the Langford Group headquarters. The door was thrown open, and 4 federal marshals entered, followed by Julian Sterling's legal team. Mr. Jake Langford, the lead marshal said, his voice flat. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, illegal organ harvesting, bigamy, and human trafficking. Please come with us. Jake didn't fight. He looked at his phone, which displayed a single, final text message from his assistant. The Langford Group has officially declared bankruptcy. The Sterling Group has acquired all our remaining assets. You have nothing left, Mr. Langford. The private airstrip of Safeguard's municipal airport was wet from the rain, the gray autumn clouds hanging low over the concrete. Michelle was being led toward a police transport van, her face splotchy and unpowdered, her hair disheveled. She was sobbing hysterically, her hands clawing at the guard's sleeves. I'm pregnant, she wailed into the cameras that were filming her arrest. I'm Jake's sister. You can't do this to me. Lillian. Lillian is the one who stabbed me. She's the crazy one. Are you still pregnant, Michelle? A calm, clear voice cut through her screaming. Michelle froze. I stepped out from behind the security line, dressed in a sleek, backless black silk pantsuit. My waist was bound in a medical brace under the fabric, but my posture was proud, powerful, and completely unbroken. Beside me stood Julian Sterling, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. I walked toward her, my heels clicking softly on the wet concrete. The medical examiners at the prison hospital finalized your report an hour ago. Michelle, I said, my voice smooth and clinical. You're not pregnant. You used a synthetic hormone injection to mimic the symptoms of pregnancy to keep Jake from looking too closely at your offshore accounts. Michelle's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. She took a step back, her lips trembling. And as for the kidney you claimed was fed to your dog, I continued, pulling a document from my clutch. The microchip in Lillian's medical registry was tracked. Your dog didn't eat it. You sold my healthy kidney on the black market to a wealthy donor from the South for $12 million. The crowd of reporters gasped, their cameras flashing wildly, capturing her pale, guilty face. You're a parasite, Michelle, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing whisper. And your brother is the idiot who let you poison his own life. The police officers didn't wait for her to scream again. They grabbed her arms and threw her into the back of the dark transport van, the heavy steel doors slamming shut with a solid, final click. The holding cell of Safeguard's high-security federal prison was cold, gray, and smelled of wet concrete and rust. Jake sat on the steel bench, his hands and feet chained to the floor. His tailored suit was gone, replaced by a simple orange jumpsuit. Without his wealth, his status, and his sister to coddle him, he looked like a broken, hollow old man, his eyes red-rimmed and vacant. The heavy iron door opened, and I walked in, flanked by Julian's personal bodyguards. Jake snapped his head up, his eyes widening with a sudden, desperate hope as he tried to drag his chains toward the partition. Lily, please, you came back. I knew you would. I knew you still loved me. I was forced, Lily. Michelle. She threatened to tell the board about our fake marriage if I didn't help her. He pressed his forehead against the glass partition, his tears mixing with the dirt on his cheeks. I drank the poison for you, Lily. Remember? On our wedding night. I sacrificed my own body to save yours. You can't let them lock me away. I sat down on the metal chair opposite him, my face completely expressionless. You didn't drink any poison, Jake, I said, my voice quiet and calm. Jake's voice died in his throat. What did you say? The warehouse owner on the desert island gave his official deposition to the federal prosecutor yesterday, I said, sliding a document against the glass. He confessed that the poison wine you drank was just a harmless food-grade coloring fluid. The entire abduction 7 years ago was planned by you and Michelle. Jake's chest stopped moving. He stared at the document, his lips trembling. You needed a reason to remove my womb so I could never have heirs, Jake, I said, my voice dropping into a freezing whisper. You wanted to make sure that the Langford family's fortune would only ever go to Michelle's child. And you wanted me to feel so guilty, so indebted to you as my savior, that I would willingly give up my organs and my blood whenever she needed them. Lily, please, he sobbed, his head dropping onto the metal counter. I was stupid. I was young. You were a monster, Jake, I said, standing up and wrapping my coat around myself. And you will spend the rest of your life in this dark corner thinking about the woman who once would have died for you, but who now doesn't even remember your name. I turned my back on him, walking out of the holding cell, his desperate, rattling chains fading into the heavy silence of the corridor. The spring had come to Safeguard, washing the city in a bright, warm light. I stood on the terrace of the Sterling Group's new estate, looking out over the sparkling blue waters of the bay. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of pine and fresh grass. My waist was fully healed, the physical pain of my past completely gone. The board just finalized the transition, Lily, Julian said, walking out onto the balcony, a cup of warm chamomile tea in his hand. He set it in my palms, his fingers brushing against mine with a quiet, profound warmth. The Langford Group's assets have been fully integrated into the Sterling Group. You are the new chief of operations. I looked at the contract in my hand, then up at his deep, warm eyes, the eyes that had looked at my broken body and had given me a kingdom to protect me. Thank you, Julian. I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, blue velvet box, sliding it onto my finger. It was a beautiful, flawless blue sapphire ring, a ring shaped like a small, delicate leaf. Happy birthday, Lily, he whispered. The shadows of the past had been completely destroyed, and the sky above us was finally beautifully free.